Captain Emma Ace Rodriguez had been flying commercial airliners for 7 years, and in all that time she'd never once mentioned her past. Not to her co-pilots, not to her flight attendants, not to anyone at Pacific Airways. As far as they knew, she was just another experienced pilot who'd come up through the civilian aviation ranks, competent, professional, and unremarkably steady. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Flight PA 447 from Seattle to Tokyo was running on schedule. The Boeing 777 was loaded with 180 passengers and 12 crew members. Emma sat in the left seat, running through her pre-flight checklist with her first officer, a eager young pilot named Marcus Chen who'd only been with the airline for 18 months. "Weather looks good all the way across the Pacific," Marcus said, studying the meteorological reports on his tablet. "Should be a smooth flight, Captain." Emma nodded, her experienced eyes scanning the instruments one final time. "Never trust a forecast completely, Marcus. The Pacific has a way of surprising you." At 0847 hours, Pacific Airways 447 lifted off from SeaTac International Airport, climbing smoothly into the clear morning sky. The first 3 hours were indeed smooth. Passengers were settling into their long flight, flight attendants were serving breakfast, and the aircraft hummed along at 35,000 feet. Emma was reviewing their fuel calculations when the first warning light illuminated on her panel. "Captain, I'm showing a pressure fluctuation in engine 2, Marcus called out, his voice tight with concern. Emma's eyes immediately went to the engine instruments. The readings were oscillating, not critically but enough to warrant attention. "I see it. Let's keep monitoring. Could be a faulty sensor." But 30 seconds later the oscillations grew worse. Then came the sound no pilot ever wants to hear, a loud bang that reverberated through the airframe followed by violent shaking. "Engine fire, engine 2. Marcus shouted as alarms began screaming in the cockpit. Emma's training, both civilian and the military training she never spoke about, kicked in instantly. Her hands moved with practiced precision across the controls. "Engine fire checklist now. I have the aircraft." "You have the aircraft," Marcus confirmed, pulling up the emergency procedures. The next 60 seconds were critical. Emma's fingers danced across switches and controls as Marcus read through the checklist. They shut down the failing engine, discharged the fire suppression system, and began the delicate process of trimming the aircraft to fly on one engine. But the emergency was far from over. "Captain, we're losing hydraulic pressure in systems A and B," Marcus reported, his voice now edged with real fear. "The engine failure must have caused more damage than we thought." Emma's mind raced through the implications. Loss of dual hydraulic systems meant compromised flight controls. She tested the control yoke, it responded but sluggishly and she could feel the aircraft wanting to roll to the right. "Declare an emergency with Tokyo Center," she ordered. "Tell them we need priority vectors to the nearest suitable airport. And get me the senior flight attendant up here." As Marcus worked the radio, Emma was already calculating. They were roughly 800 miles from land in any direction. The nearest suitable airport was Anchorage, Alaska, about 600 nautical miles to their northeast. With one engine and compromised controls, could they make it? Sarah Kim, the senior flight attendant, appeared at the cockpit door, her professional composure intact despite the obvious vibrations running through the aircraft. "Sarah, we have an engine failure and hydraulic problems," Emma said calmly. "No immediate danger, but we're diverting to Anchorage. I need you to prepare the cabin for a possible rough landing. Brief your crew on emergency procedures, but keep the passengers calm. Make it sound routine." "Understood, Captain." Sarah's eyes met Emma's for a moment, a silent acknowledgement of trust, before she disappeared back into the cabin. Over the next 20 minutes, Emma fought the aircraft. The flight controls grew increasingly unresponsive. What should have been a simple turn toward Anchorage required constant adjustments and muscle. Sweat beaded on her forehead despite the cool cockpit temperature. "Captain, Anchorage is reporting weather deteriorating," Marcus said. "Visibility down to 2 miles and snow showers, ceiling at 800 feet. They're asking if we want to consider alternate airports." Emma glanced at the fuel gauge. They had enough to reach Anchorage with reasonable reserves, but going farther would be pushing it, especially with the increased drag from their current configuration. And every minute they flew, the hydraulic systems degraded further. "Negative on alternates," she decided. "Anchorage is our best option. Tell them we're committed." What Emma didn't know was that her emergency had already attracted attention from an unexpected source. Two F-22 Raptors from Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson in Anchorage had been scrambled on a training mission when Pacific Airways 447 declared its emergency. Major Jack Razor Callahan and Captain Lisa Venom Martinez were flying a standard combat air patrol exercise when they received the call from Anchorage Approach Control. Razor, Venom, we have a commercial heavy inbound with significant mechanical issues. Pacific Airways 447, Boeing 777, requesting you intercept and provide visual assessment. They've lost engine 2 and report hydraulic problems. Roger that, Anchorage. Razor flight is inbound, Jack responded, already banking his F-22 toward the intercept coordinates. The two fighters accelerated to supersonic speed, covering the distance to the distressed airliner in minutes. As they approached, Jack pulled alongside the massive Boeing, his trained eyes scanning the aircraft's exterior. What he saw made his pulse quicken. The number 2 engine cowling was partially missing, revealing obvious fire damage. Hydraulic fluid was streaming from multiple points on the wing, creating a visible mist in the airliner's wake. This was bad, worse than the initial report suggested. Anchorage Razor. Visual on PA-447. Confirm extensive damage to right engine. Multiple hydraulic leaks visible. Aircraft appears to be porpoising slightly, pilot is fighting to maintain control. Jack maneuvered his fighter closer, positioning himself where he could look directly into the 777's cockpit. He could see two pilots, the captain on the left working the controls with obvious effort. Something about the way she moved, the precision of her inputs despite the aircraft's degraded state, struck him as familiar. This wasn't just good flying, this was exceptional flying. Venom, you see the way that captain is handling the aircraft? Jack asked over their private channel. Yeah, whoever's in that left seat knows what they're doing, Lisa replied. That bird should be rolling hard to the right with that much asymmetric thrust and hydraulic loss. But look, she's keeping it almost level. Those are some serious skills. Jack had an idea. He switched to the emergency frequency he knew the commercial flight would be monitoring. Pacific Airways 447, this is Air Force Razor 1-1. We have you visual. You're doing great work up there, Captain. We're going to escort you all the way to Anchorage. There was a brief pause before a calm, professional female voice responded. Razor 1-1, Pacific 447. Appreciate the company. Can you confirm the extent of the visible damage? Something about that voice triggered a memory in Jack's mind. That cadence, that unflappable tone under pressure. He knew it from somewhere. Pacific 447, I show significant engine damage and multiple hydraulic leaks. Your right wing is losing fluid at a high rate. How are your flight controls responding? Degraded but manageable, Razor. We'll make Anchorage. Might not be pretty, but we'll make it. That confidence, that almost casual certainty in the face of a life-threatening emergency, Jack had heard it before. Years ago. In a very different context. Captain, request your call sign, Jack said, deviating from standard protocol. Another pause. Longer this time. When the voice came back, it was measured, careful. Razor, I'm not sure what you mean. This is Pacific Airways 447, Captain Rodriguez. Rodriguez. The name clicked into place like a puzzle piece and suddenly Jack was transported back 12 years. Naval Air Station Fallon. The Top Gun School. A young Navy lieutenant with reflexes like lightning and nerves of steel. Emma? Jack breathed into his mic, forgetting protocol entirely. Emma Ace Rodriguez? The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa shot him a confused look from her aircraft, clearly wondering what was going on. Finally, the commercial pilot's voice came back, and this time there was something different in it, a hint of the fighter pilot she used to be. Been a long time, Razor. Didn't expect to run into you like this. Holy. Jack couldn't believe it. Venom, you're not going to believe this. The captain of that 777? She was Top Gun. Class of 2012. One of the best fighter pilots I ever flew against. Lisa's eyes widened inside her helmet. Wait, the Ace Rodriguez. The one they still talk about at Fallon? The pilot who won the Top Gun trophy flying with a partially failed hydraulic system. The very same, Jack confirmed, his respect for the situation multiplying exponentially. If anyone could save that crippled airliner, it was Ace Rodriguez. But the situation was deteriorating. Emma's voice came over the radio again, and this time the strain was evident. Razor, I'm losing more hydraulic pressure. Flight controls are getting mushy. I'm going to need some help here. Tell us what you need, Ace, Jack said, dropping all pretense of formal radio protocol. I need you to be my eyes. The hydraulics are affecting my instruments. I can't trust what I'm seeing. I need real-time feedback on my flight attitude, especially in the final approach. Can you do that? Affirmative. We'll be your guardian angels all the way down. What followed was a display of flying skill that would be talked about for years to come. Emma coaxed the damaged 777 toward Anchorage, fighting the aircraft every inch of the way. The F-22s flanked her, Jack on the right, Lisa on the left, calling out her altitude, attitude, and airspeed with precision. "Ace, you're dropping your right wing 5 degrees, Jack called. Emma's response was immediate, correcting the roll with the limited control authority she had remaining. Altitude 12,000 feet, descending 800 feet per minute. Little fast on the descent, Ace, Lisa reported. Copy. Can't reduce power much more or I'll lose control authority entirely, Emma replied. Going to have to ride this one down a bit hot. Inside the cockpit of the 777, Marcus was pale but holding it together. He'd figured out by now that his captain was no ordinary commercial pilot. The way she handled the aircraft, the military jargon creeping into her communications, the obvious respect from the fighter pilots escorting them. Captain, if you don't mind me asking, who exactly are you? Emma allowed herself a brief smile despite the sweat running down her face and the muscle fatigue building in her arms from fighting the controls. Right now, Marcus, I'm just a pilot trying to get us home. The rest doesn't matter. But it did matter. Because what Emma was doing required every ounce of the skill she developed during her 9 years as a Navy fighter pilot. The 1,000-carrier landings. The combat missions over hostile territory. The countless hours of training in degraded flight conditions. All of it was coming together in this moment. Anchorage approach, Pacific 447 is 20 miles out, Emma transmitted. Requesting vectors for ILS approach runway 7 left. Pacific 447, Anchorage approach. Runway 7 left, wind 080 at 15, gusting to 25. Be advised we have snow showers moving across the field. Visibility currently 1.5 miles. You're cleared for the approach. Emergency equipment is standing by. Emma acknowledged and began the delicate process of configuring the aircraft for landing. Each movement of the flaps and landing gear created new aerodynamic forces she had to counteract with her limited control authority. Flaps 15, she called to Marcus, who operated the flap lever. The aircraft pitched down as the flaps extended. Emma countered with back pressure on the yoke, her arms straining. The control column felt like it was moving through molasses. Gear down. Marcus moved the landing gear lever. The gear extended with a reassuring thump, but the additional drag made the aircraft want to roll right again. Emma fought it, holding the wings level through sheer determination and skill. Ace, you're on glide slope, on centerline, Jack reported from his position slightly above and behind the 777. Looking good. You've got this. But Emma knew the hardest part was still ahead. Landing a heavy aircraft with degraded flight controls required a delicate balance. Too slow and she'd lose what little control authority remained. Too fast and she'd run out of runway or risk structural damage. Flaps 30, she commanded. More drag, more pitch change, more control inputs required. Her arms were burning with fatigue, but she didn't dare let up the pressure. 1,000 feet above touchdown, Lisa called out. Sync rate 700 feet per minute. 500 feet. You're drifting left of centerline, Ace. Need a correction to the right. Emma made the adjustment, but the aircraft responded sluggishly. She could see the runway now through the snow, a strip of lights in the winter gloom. So close. 200 feet. Airspeed 165 knots. Little fast but acceptable. You're back on centerline. Inside the cabin, passengers gripped their armrests. Sarah and her flight attendants were in their jump seats, having secured the cabin for landing. Everyone could feel that this wasn't a normal approach. The unusual attitude of the aircraft, the grinding vibrations, the sense that they were balanced on a knife's edge. 100 feet. 50 feet. You're over the threshold, Ace. Start your flare. This was the moment of truth. Emma pulled back on the yoke, using the last of her energy to raise the nose of the 777 for landing. But with the compromised hydraulics, the response was delayed, mushy. Come on, baby, she whispered to the aircraft. Just a little more. The main wheels touched the runway with a firm but controlled impact. Immediately, Emma deployed the spoilers and thrust reversers on the remaining good engine. The asymmetric thrust tried to yaw the aircraft to the left, but she was ready for it, compensating with rudder and differential braking. The 777 decelerated down the runway, tracking remarkably straight despite everything working against it. Fire trucks and emergency vehicles raced alongside, ready to respond if needed. As the aircraft slowed below taxi speed, Emma finally allowed herself to breathe. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Anchorage." The cockpit erupted in relief. Marcus was laughing and crying at the same time. Over the radio they could hear cheering from the tower controllers. Jack's voice came through, filled with emotion. "Ace, that was one hell of a piece of flying. You just saved 192 lives with a broken airplane. They're going to write about this one." Emma taxied the aircraft to the designated emergency parking area, where it was surrounded immediately by emergency crews. Only when she'd completed the shutdown checklist and the engines had spooled down did she allow herself to slump back in her seat. "Captain," Marcus said, his voice full of awe, "I don't know what your story is, but that was the most incredible flying I've ever witnessed." The aftermath was chaotic. Passengers were evacuated via stairs, many of them in tears, hugging the flight attendants and asking to thank the captain personally. News crews, already alerted to the emergency, were setting up outside the terminal. The story of the dramatic landing was already going viral on social media. Emma was completing paperwork with the FAA inspectors when there was a knock on the operations office door. Two figures in flight suits entered, Jack and Lisa, having landed their F-22s and rushed over to the commercial terminal. "Permission to enter, Captain?" Jack asked with a grin. Emma stood, a smile breaking across her exhausted face. "Razor. Still flying like you own the sky, I see." They embraced briefly, the reunion of old colleagues who'd shared the bonds of military aviation. Lisa introduced herself, her admiration evident. "Ma'am, it's an honor. They still use your techniques in the training syllabus at Top Gun." The Rodriguez recovering from a flat spin using asymmetric thrust and differential flight controls. "I've practiced it 100 times in the simulator." Emma shook her head modestly. "That was a long time ago. Different life." "Why'd you leave?" Jack asked. "You were being groomed for squadron command. Everyone said you'd make admiral someday." Emma's expression grew distant. "I loved flying fighters. Loved everything about it. But after 9 years, after 3 combat deployments, I needed something different. I needed to remember that flying could be about bringing people safely home to their families, not about targeting coordinates and weapons release." She gestured toward the window, where they could see the damaged 777 being examined by investigators. "This is why I fly now. Those 180 passengers, they have families, lives, dreams. Getting them home safely means everything." "And you never told anyone at the airline about your background?" Lisa asked. "What would be the point? I wasn't that person anymore. I was just Captain Rodriguez, commercial pilot." She paused. "Until today when I needed to be both." The FAA investigator approached with preliminary findings. "Captain Rodriguez, initial assessment shows the engine failure was caused by an uncontained turbine disc rupture. Fragments damaged 2 hydraulic systems and several flight control components. The fact that you maintained control and landed safely with this level of damage is extraordinary. We'll need a full debrief, but unofficially, you just accomplished something that simulators say shouldn't be possible." By evening, the story had exploded across media worldwide. But it wasn't just the successful emergency landing that captured public imagination. It was the revelation of Emma's background. Someone had found her Navy service record. Photos of her in fighter pilot gear circulated online. Video footage of her Top Gun graduation, where she'd received the trophy as top pilot of her class, went viral. The contrast was striking. The young, fierce fighter pilot in her 20s and the calm, professional airline captain who'd just saved 192 lives. Two sides of the same extraordinary person. Emma's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Interview requests from every major news organization. Book deals. Movie offers. The airline CEO wanted to give her a commendation. The Navy wanted to feature her in recruiting materials. She ignored most of it, sitting instead in a quiet corner of the pilot's lounge, watching the news coverage with a mixture of discomfort and resignation. Her past and present had collided in the most public way possible. Marcus found her there. "Captain, Emma, I just wanted to say thank you. I learned more about flying in those 30 minutes than in my entire career. The way you handled that aircraft, the decisions you made, you saved all of us. You did good too, Marcus. Stayed calm, ran the checklists perfectly, kept me informed. That's what being a good first officer is all about." "Will you teach me?" he asked. "Some of what you know. Not the fighter pilot stuff necessarily, but how to think like you think. How to fly like you fly." Emma studied the young pilot. She saw in him something of her younger self, eager, passionate, wanting to be the best. "Sure, Marcus. I'll teach you. But on one condition." "Anything. Remember that all the skill in the world doesn't matter if you forget why you're in that seat. We're not flying to show off. We're not flying for glory or recognition. We're flying to take care of the people who trust us with their lives. That's the only thing that matters." Marcus nodded solemnly. "I understand." A week later, Emma found herself in an unexpected place. Naval Air Station Fallon, the home of Top Gun. The current commander, an old friend from her Navy days, had invited her to speak to the newest class of fighter pilots. She stood before a room full of young aviators, the best of the best, just as she'd once been. They looked at her with curiosity and respect. This legendary pilot who'd left the fighter world behind only to prove her skills in an entirely different arena. "I'm not here to tell you about being a fighter pilot," Emma began. "You've got the best instructors in the world for that. I'm here to tell you about something else, about remembering why we fly." She spent the next hour talking about her journey. The thrill of carrier landings and combat missions. The brotherhood of squadron life. But also the cost. The friends lost, the toll on personal relationships, the weight of making life and death decisions at Mach 2. "When I left the Navy, some people thought I was throwing away my career. Walking away from everything I'd worked for. But here's what I learned. Being a great pilot isn't about the aircraft you fly or the mission you perform. It's about the responsibility you accept every time you strap into that seat." She told them about Flight 447. About the moment when the engine failed and she had to draw on every skill she'd ever learned. About Marcus, her first officer, who needed her to be more than just a pilot. He needed her to be a leader, a teacher, someone who could show him how to handle the impossible. "Last Tuesday I saved 192 lives. But you know what? I do that every single flight. You do that every single flight. Whether you're flying a fighter at 50,000 feet or an airliner at 35,000 feet, whether you're protecting your country or transporting families on vacation, you're responsible for lives. That's the sacred trust of being a pilot." The room was silent, absorbing her words. "So here's my advice. Be the best fighter pilot you can be. Master every skill, push every limit, win every engagement. But never forget that someday, those skills might be called upon to save lives in ways you never expected. And when that moment comes, you'd better be ready to be more than just a great aviator. You'd better be ready to be a great human being too." After her talk, Jack found her in the hallway. "That was something, Ace. Got them thinking about things beyond just the mission. That's the goal. They're so focused on being warriors, which they need to be, but they also need to remember their guardians. Protectors. There's a difference." "You coming back?" Jack asked. "To the Navy? After what you did, they'd take you back in a heartbeat. Probably promote you on the spot." Emma smiled and shook her head. "No, Razor. My place is in the airlines now. I've got a new mission, getting people home safely, one flight at a time. Maybe mentoring young pilots like Marcus. Showing them that flying isn't just about the controls and the checklists. It's about the people." "The Navy's loss," Jack said, "but those passengers gain." Flight PA 447's route from Seattle to Tokyo had been restored, and Emma Rodriguez was back in the captain's seat. The aircraft was different, a brand new 777, but the mission was the same. Marcus Chin sat in the right seat, now her permanent first officer. The airline had honored his request to fly with Emma, recognizing that the mentorship relationship between them was something special. As they climbed out of SeaTac into a brilliant morning sky, Marcus glanced over at his captain. "You know, they're making a movie about the emergency landing. I heard Tom Cruise is interested." Emma laughed. "Of course he is. Top Gun never really leaves you alone, does it? Are you going to be involved? Consultant or something?" "Absolutely not. They can tell whatever story they want. The real story is simple. We had an emergency, we handled it professionally, everyone went home safely. That's all that matters." They flew in companionable silence for a while, the aircraft steady and smooth. Behind them, 180 passengers read, slept, watched movies, completely unaware that they were being flown by a living legend. Someone who'd chosen quiet competence over fame, chosen responsibility over glory. "Captain Rodriguez to the cabin," Emma announced over the PA. "Good morning, everyone. We've reached our cruising altitude of 35,000 feet. Flight time to Tokyo will be approximately 9 hours. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight. We'll take good care of you." And she would. Because that's what she did. Whether in a fighter jet or a commercial airliner, whether in combat or in peacetime, Emma Ace Rodriguez was a pilot in the truest sense of the word. Someone who accepted the sacred responsibility of flight and honored it with every skill she possessed. The F-22 pilots who'd escorted her that day had revealed her past to the world. But in doing so, they'd also revealed something more important. That true greatness in aviation isn't measured by speed or altitude or combat victories. It's measured by the lives you protect, the people you mentor, and the responsibility you honor every single time you take the controls. Emma looked out at the vast Pacific stretching ahead of them, endless blue under endless sky. Somewhere out there, other pilots were flying their missions. Fighter pilots defending freedom, commercial pilots carrying precious cargo of human lives, student pilots learning the sacred art of flight. She was part of that community. Always had been. Always would be. And that was enough.